You are a seasoned battlefield commander. Give us a sense of what you think is going on the ground right now in Ukraine.
Well, it's both a pivotal and perilous moment, I think, for Ukraine, for Russia as well, I might add. Russia clearly lost the battles of Kyiv and Chernihiv, a city in the north, and then Sumy, a city in the northeast. Ukraine won those battles. And the Russians have withdrawn from those areas. They have to reconstitute the battalions that were in there because they took significant losses in personnel, not just from killed in action, but also from wounded, of course, severely, and then a lot of losses in armored vehicles and weapon systems. So they have to replace those losses, and then they want to push those forces around to the eastern side of Ukraine and bring them in from there, south of Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, which is still embattled, but which the Russians still have never encircled. And they want to reinforce there the very hard-fought, costly, and modest gains that they've achieved. Keep in mind that having given up on their main objective, which was to topple the Ukrainian government, replace President Zelensky with a pro-Russian president, and enjoy a victory parade through Kyiv and then go home, now what they're trying to do is to increase the area controlled by the Russian-supported separatists in the so-called Donbass, the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts or provinces in the southeast of the country, to solidify now the ground line of communication, if you will, between the Donbass and Crimea, which they took control of course, in 2014. They'd like to have gone all the way out to the southwest port city of Odessa and denied Ukraine access to the Black Sea entirely. It doesn't appear that that is going to be remotely achievable. So they're pouring what they have now in to reinforce their effort in the southeast of the country. And in the meantime, of course, Ukraine is having to pivot as well. They are also having to reconstitute their forces that sustained losses in both personnel and equipment, and then they have to transport them some 450 or 500 miles southeast to reinforce the Ukrainian forces that are defending against the push in that general southeast area. So it is, again, it's a perilous moment in that regard because Ukraine has to really work fast to do this. They also will be challenged to replace the losses and both people and equipment. This is why President Zelensky and his foreign minister have just emphasized weapons, weapons, weapons. What they need are the systems in Eastern Europe that are compatible with theirs. So we're talking about essentially Eastern Bloc tanks, right. Infantry personnel carriers, artillery, multiple launch rocket systems, the munitions for all of that. Especially the air defense system. In fact, they got one from Slovakia, and we replaced that with Patriots. These are systems we actually don't have in our arsenal. We don't even have the ammunition that can be fired from their artillery. They have 152 millimeter howitzers. We have 155. But then there's an awful lot that we can do as well to increase the number of, again, these very lethal Javelin anti-tank guided missile systems that are fire and forget, that take out the Russian tanks from the top, the Stinger air defense missiles as well. All of this has to be pushed in there as quickly as is possible so that the Ukrainians can indeed be ready to deal with the additional Russian forces that we expect to see in the southeastern part of the country.
General, from your experience in the battlefield, when you say quickly, how quickly is that? I noticed you said reconstitute on the Russian side, not just move the forces, reconstitute them. What is your best guess about how long the Ukrainians have before they're really engaged in a fundamental way in the east?
Well, having taught economics along the way, I realize you can never go wrong by saying it depends when you begin an answer, but it does depend. It depends on how rapidly Russia can actually find the replacement soldiers. Keep in mind that they are scouring the eastern military districts, Syria, Georgia, even this Russian security contractor group, the Wagner Group, which basically has mercenaries working for it in various countries around the world, including throughout Africa. It's got to find the replacements, and it's got to find the replacement weapon systems as well. Our sense is, the estimates are, that they employed 75% of the available forces in the first phase of the invasion of Ukraine. That doesn't mean that there's a lot less, because you can't just strip everywhere of everything. And so they're challenged in that regard. Their new conscripts are just coming into service. The old conscripts who are only with the forces for a year are supposed to have come to the end of their service. That's, by the way, about one quarter to 1/5 of the entire invasion force, which is one of the reasons why, again, they've performed so relatively poorly. Again, you can't do much in a year's worth of service to create really professional forces. So they've got real challenges on their hands. And of course, so do the Ukrainians. Again, they don't have a huge reserve sitting around waiting to be pushed in one direction or another. So they're scrambling also to replace, but they're a nation in arms. They are a nation at war. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia has done more to really inflame Ukrainian nationalism, to promote it, to catalyze it. And then, of course, President Zelensky's inspired leadership has galvanized the entire country. And the idea that, yes, women and children can leave, but every male Ukrainian citizen is expected to serve his country right now, this is a pretty powerful concept. And so the Ukrainians have a pool of individuals, but again, how well trained they are, how quickly they can become, again, professional members of military units and teams, that's somewhat in question. And then, of course, can, again, Eastern Europe in particular and the West provide additional capabilities, replacement systems, and so forth for Ukraine in a quickly enough manner to help them to repel, to halt, and then to roll back what Russia is going to bring at them.
General, as I've read, and you would know from experience, the objectives almost always change during the course of a war. Give us your best sense right now of what you think the realistic objectives of President Putin are, on the one hand. Is it basically to take the Donbass? And what should they be for the West and for Ukraine?
Well, clearly, President Putin's objectives have changed dramatically, again, from toppling the government, replacing President Zelensky with a pro-Russian figure and so forth. That obviously was just unattainable. And a lot of us, by the way, even from the beginning said, look, there's no way they'll ever take Kiev, much less control it. Again, Ukraine is a country of the size of Texas with 13 million more people, or there were. Of course, 4 million of them have left, tragically, because of this already. And another, something like 10 million total have been displaced inside the country. So, again, what Russia wants to achieve now is something, presumably, that Putin can hold out, perhaps on this anniversary that's coming up in May, that they always celebrate, or at least in the weeks that lie ahead, and say, look, we achieved something very significant that was worth this horrific loss that they've sustained, and also over which they've been made the pariah of the world. It truly is the evil empire. And again, adding to that now these revelations that as each village that the Russians occupied is re-entered, you're finding these horrific scenes, of course, of just endless series of essentially war crimes. Clearly violations of the Geneva Convention and the law of land warfare, which I think in aggregate will create some sort of really the kind of moment that you had after Srebrenica in Bosnia, when, of course, some 7,000 or so Muslim men were killed by Serbian forces, which gave the impetus for the U.S. to finally really get engaged in the war, bomb Serbia to the negotiating table, and then unleash the great ambassador Richard Holbrooke on them and get the peace agreement. In this case, again, I think Russia is out for something that Putin can hold out as a success and can at least make a plausible case. It won't be believable to the outside world, but a plausible case to his own country, by the way, where he's enjoyed an increase in popularity because he controls all the airwaves and so forth. He's up to 83% of approval from something, 15 points below that. But that's what he's after. That's what he has to try to achieve. And of course, what Ukraine has to do is ensure that that is just not possible. It's not inconceivable. I'm not predicting it. But it's not inconceivable that Ukraine could not only frustrate them in achieving that objective, but it could actually roll them back, certainly take back an awful lot, if not all, of what Russia has achieved during this invasion, and maybe even roll back parts of the Donbass. So, again, they have done so impressively in so many different ways, and fighting with such really not just determination and resolve and heart, but also creativity, resourcefulness, skill, professional capability, all of that. And so, again, I think this is a very dynamic period that lies ahead, and it's one that bears very careful watching.